love you more.
At some point every day, I log onto Facebook out of habit at this point. I've been on that network since it started in 2004, so 14 years of conditioning has led me to this habit. I remember a day when Facebook was literally just a social network. It was a Friendster or a MySpace that was only for kids in college. It seemed like a great idea, a new medium to explore since MySpace was on its way out. It was a haven for college students like myself to network with people from class or from other schools without being too intrusive. It was always awkward trying to get someone's number or their AIM handle to keep in touch with them. Facebook allowed you to search for their real name and connect with them without really having to intrude on their daily life. Not to sound elitist, but this was the golden age of Facebook to me. You basically had to qualify to be on Facebook by having a .edu email, and it was incredibly easy to find people because they had to use their real names. 2006, Facebook was open to the public. Anyone that was 13 years or older and had a valid email address was able to start an account. At the time, this was a great idea. I had some friends that didn't go to college because they went straight into the workforce or they joined the armed forces, and I was able to see those individuals on their path of life that was vastly different to mine. An unforeseen consequence on my part was that there was a lot more people than my personal friends that came to Facebook. Everyone joined. It was a phenomenon with consequences. Fast forward to 2018, we've gone about 12 years since the opening of Facebook to the public. What started as a social network for college students has mutated into a news and marketing powerhouse. Most people have transitioned to Instagram as their social network, which is also owned by Facebook, coincidentally. But people go on Facebook still to find news, ideas, and details on current events within their respective locales. With cross-promotion from IG, Twitter, and other social media, Facebook has become a one-stop shop for connecting with the lives of others. Unfortunately, this means that people have become complacent in how they find their news and what they accept as journalism. I gave you this exposition on Facebook to tell you about this specifically. It seems that my feed has been inundated with articles that seem to proliferate misinformation. And this misinformation comes from both sides of the political spectrum. Instead of dismantling each and every one, I wanted to explore why this was happening and why it seems that not only my friends but the public at large is so susceptible to disseminate articles which are either unsound or invalid. The conclusion I came to was logic. Logic is often falsely equivocated as common sense. That's not the case. Logic is learned, and many people have not taken the time to learn it. In this video, I'm going to attempt to explain logic and how fallacies derived from it can permeate our daily lives, and why that's important. First, let's quickly go over logic in the context that I want to talk about, which is syllogistic logic. To simplify, a syllogism is something that follows the premise-conclusion format. If premise A and premise B are true, therefore conclusion AB. It's at the heart of what we know as deductive reasoning. To construct a syllogism, we first must understand the laws of logic. For the sake of this video, let's keep it simple and stick with the 3 traditional laws of thought, which date back to the Greek philosophers Plato and Aristotle. These laws are axiomatic, which means that they are self-evident truths. The first one, law of identity. For all instances of A equals A. This is the reason why people always ask to define terms before they debate. Terms can have several meanings or interpretations, and they need to be defined before they're argued for or against. Law of non-contradiction. If A equals A, then it cannot also be true that A equals not A. To put it simply, contradictions can exist in a logical argument. Something cannot be true and false at the same time. Third and last one, law of excluded middle. Either A or not A must be true. All bivalent propositions must be true or have its direct negative be true. The proposition that 1 plus 1 equals 3 must either be true, or the fact that it's negative, that 1 plus 1 does not equal 3, is true. Since I mentioned it, What do I mean by bivalent? Bivalence is the property we call a pair of propositions which have exactly one truth value, kind of like binary code. So either the statement is true or false. There are statements which are non-bivalent, like some opinion statements or conjectures with insufficient evidence. For example, I like the color green is not a bivalent statement. It's nonsensical to argue for or against that. Another example is, I think life on other planets exists. Since there's not enough evidence, this is something that we can only calculate the probability of. And that would be more inductive reasoning than it would be deductive. These axiomatic laws are the basis for logical fallacies. I'm oversimplifying, but logical fallacies can be seen as different violations of these three basic laws. So here are a few. Hasty generalization, secundum quid, making a generalization based off of an insufficient sample size or number of examples. Cherry picking, selecting only the examples that support the hypothesis. False equivocation, incorrectly equating one term with another. Take a look at this Vox video on drug companies making you buy more medicine than you need. I watched the video and the companion article on Propublica, and the link will be in the description. A majority of the article and the video are on eye drops. They do talk about cancer drugs, but the video and the article are committing the three logical fallacies that I just mentioned, specifically in the title. It hastily generalized drug companies based on the example of eye drops and cancer medication. It cherry-picked the information from those industries to help bolster their argument. The false equivocation is subtle, but it seems that they're trying to imply that this is widespread amongst the entire pharmaceutical industry and is a major contributor to American healthcare costs. The dumb part is, the journalism within the article seems to be fairly sound, and they didn't need to resort to using such a clickbait title. Now, I didn't bother doing any of my own research on this because this isn't the point of the video, but it seems like they make valid points. The structure of the argument, however, is flawed. Because you probably couldn't apply that argument, the argument that companies force you to buy more medicine than you need, to other prescription medication, like heart medication or insulin. The argument falls apart the instant you try to apply it to the non-cherry pick data. And that's the problem. When you use logical fallacies to prove your point, they weaken your argument, regardless of how valid it was in the first place. Let's take a look at a few other fallacies. Strawman, a misrepresentation of the opposition's position so that it's easier to dismantle. Post hoc ergo propter hoc translates to after this, therefore because of this. A happened, B happened, therefore A caused B. Relevant conclusion, ignoratio elenchi, missing the point. The arguments may be valid, but an irrelevant conclusion is formed. Argumentum ad nauseam, repeating an argument over and over without substantiating it. The repetition is meant to try and increase the validity of the argument. Here's a really short Breitbart video they released a few weeks, maybe a month ago. The video is seemingly pointing out facts until about here. If you don't see how this is a logical fallacy, ignoring whether or not it is true, then you'll start to see why understanding logic itself is so important. This one is much more nuanced, and I can see why people are drawn to it. First, they draw the straw man that the Democrats actively prevent ICE and Border Patrol from doing their job to control immigration and the inflow of drugs. Then the post hoc idea is that since there are still illegal immigrants and drugs still coming in, is because the Democrats are preventing them. There are a lot of logical fallacies baked into this, especially if you know politics, but these are just the logical ones based on the phrasing alone. Let's go on to the next part. It's more important than ever to build the wall. Where did that come from? It's irrelevant to the issue of DACA and illegal immigration and drugs. It doesn't attempt to identify the cause, and it doesn't offer a solution based on any evidence presented. It's a non sequitur by definition. It's also argumentum ad nauseam. The repetition of build the wall is the mantra that they go by. And repeating it doesn't really give the idea any credence. Building the wall may actually be the right response, but nothing that Trump has ever said or Breitbart has ever reported has substantiated whether or not the wall would be effective or feasible. I admit this one requires some knowledge of US politics and journalism, but the logical fallacies are still there, and that's the problem. So Vox and Breitbart are pretty easy to pick on, but since I was curious, I started to look into the leanings of all political outlets to see where the ones that I frequent stack up. And here's a chart that someone made. It's not totally empirical, but on my experience in reading from a lot of these outlets over the years, I think it's safe to say they're within a reasonable margin of error. I picked this chart not only because it shows political leaning, but the quality of the content. Vox and Breitbart are very popular within their key demographics. I see a decent amount of links to both of these sites on my Facebook feed. It's troublesome to me that I see them at all. This is where I realize another crux to the issue, another glaring fallacy that a lot of people commit, and is basically furthered by Facebook. Confirmation bias. The fallacy in which you only read articles or gain information that can be easily assimilated into your current ideology and reject outright that which can't. It's basically cooked into the chart. Look at the hyperpartisan categories to confirm your beliefs. I noticed that this after Trump got elected too. On Facebook, some anti-Trump people unfriended their pro-Trump friends and vice versa. And this is also exacerbated by Facebook's feature that pumps relevant ads and media based on your personal political leaning. By the way, also check the link in the description to find out how to turn that off. Somehow I got classified as extremely left-leaning when that's definitely not the case. I'm reminded of a stand-up special when I was just getting into college, and it was Chris Rock's HBO special, Never Scared. He said this.
But the whole country's got a fucked up mentality, man. We all got a gang mentality. Republicans are fucking idiots, and Democrats are fucking idiots, and conservatives are idiots, and liberals are idiots, and anyone that makes up their mind before they hit an issue is a fucking fool, okay? Everybody. No. Everybody's so busy wanting to be down with a gang. I'm a conservative, I'm liberal, I'm conservative. It's bullshit. Be a fucking person. Listen. Let it swirl around your head. Then form your opinion. No normal, decent person is one thing, okay? I got some shit I'm conservative about. I got some shit I'm liberal about. Crime, I'm conservative. Prostitution, I'm liberal.
This has always resonated with me. How are there people that make up their minds before they hear the issue? How do you judge an argument from your perspective rather than judge it on its own merits? Why is there such a disconnect between the left and the right? It seems like everything is about ideologues and demagoguery and monoliths. It feels like the sensationalism has made everyone stupider in the process. People get most of their news from social media, and rarely does anyone do their due diligence in finding out what has the propensity of being true. This also brings up another fallacy known as the false dichotomy, or the black and white fallacy. It's the idea that everyone is only presented with two options. You either have to be on the left or the right, when that's not the case. There's a third option. You could be in the middle. There's no law stating that you have to fall into either camp. It's just been perpetuated by American politics that we have a two-party system. Just because the only viable candidates are part of either of those two parties doesn't mean that every citizen needs to be on one side or the other. Which brings me to my next point, epistemology. This is why understanding logic is so important. Epistemology is the theory of knowledge. It's the branch of philosophy that is concerned with discerning truth from opinion. Unless you've taken a class on logic or philosophy, you've probably never heard that word being thrown around. Kind of a problem. If you don't know why the things you believe are true, then how do you hope to change anyone's mind? This is why I think flat earthers exist. They don't understand epistemology, let alone scientific theory. But here's the bigger question. Without referring to pictures, which they seem to think are all fakes anyways, can you explain to a flat earther how we know the earth is a spheroid? If you can't explain something that's scientifically proven, how do you even hope to convince someone about something as ambiguous as gun control, or single-payer healthcare, or ed policy reform? So that basically concludes this video. I hope you learned a little bit about logic and apply it next time you read an article or have a conversation with someone. I've linked all the reference materials below if you want to draw your own conclusions. But yeah, share, comment, like, lates.